educate consumers on this fuel.
At least the music sounds vaguely Irish.
Yeah, okay. And the other one would be on biodiesel. Biodiesel has struggled for the last few years on the production side. And now there's more demand for biodiesel. There's some plants getting up and running, and we want to incent those producers from gallon one at 3 cents a gallon. The state of Missouri just passed recently a 30-cent incentive for their biodiesel producers, and so we want to continue the incentive for B5 and higher at the retail level as well. And so those are issues that I think that we're close and are very important to the economy of this state. There's about close to 50,000 jobs today in Iowa that's related to renewable fuels. And we expect with biodiesel that we'll see in a very short period of time about 5,000 more jobs for Iowans that are good paying jobs. So we need to continue to explore these efforts, and our oil wells, our cornfields and our bean fields, and so whatever we can do to make that happen.
Jack, on biodiesel, do you anticipate the state credit would replace what apparently will ethanol?
The state credit now would just continue for the petroleum marketers. Hopefully we have a new credit at up to 3 cents for the producers.
Right. What I'm saying is you're doing this because the feds are scaling back?
Well, the feds stepped up to the plate and extended their $1 a gallon blender credit for a year. And so that's bringing the plants back online, and the demand is proving, it's been proving nationwide, and so that's kind of where we're at.
But on every budget cutting list, you see that as a possibility.
But let me also speak to that. One of the things, the federal mandate on the use of biodiesel is significant, and that's going to incent demand in the country, or it's going to require, in essence, require demand in the country. The issue is who's going to produce that. So a number of states are looking at ways to make sure it's our ethanol plants that get started to produce that. I think it's 1 billion gallons.
And there's several stocks that can use. Of course, soybean oil, that's the one that's most available today. It's probably the one that's the most expensive as well, but there's other stocks such as grease from the packing plants and other stocks that are available. But here in Iowa, the product that's available is soybean oil. And I think it come down about 20 cents a gallon in the last 3 days, if anybody's interested.
Let me talk about a little different subject. As you all know, we are struggling through a conference committee where we have certainly some disagreements with the House. They're insisting on separate slush fund set aside for tax cuts for, gosh, we don't know who they intend to give it to, but it certainly looks like it's big corporations, and that's their main focus in this conference committee. Caught in the crosshairs is a program that's a constitutional responsibility for the state of Iowa, and that is to provide what's called indigent defense. That's legal defense. We are required under the Constitution to provide that defense for young people and adults that are in trouble with the law. We have to do it. Those services are being provided out there by private attorneys across the state of Iowa, both attorneys that the state hires, but then private attorneys across the state of Iowa, and we're not paying our bills. They're caught in our disagreements, and we think it's time to set that piece aside, the piece on indigent defense, about $19 million, and provide that money. So next week we'll bring out of Appropriations Committee a separate appropriation for that issue alone to try and get it back to where we're paying those people. They've provided the services, they've had the costs involved, and we're just not paying our bills, and that's wrong for the state of Iowa not to pay its bills. So we're going to do that next week. We will also assess pretty soon here whether we will need to do a similar thing, because the legislature is not able to reach agreement on a set of other issues. We think it's really important that we pay our bills. So we'll probably also look at things in the Department of Corrections in terms of protecting public safety in the state. with that, I think we'd be happy to take your questions.
Senator, a House subcommittee, governmental subcommittee, this morning brought out a bill that virtually ban all abortion after 20 weeks. What features does that bill have in the Senate versus the House?
I think the appropriate discussion at this point would be to have that conversation with people that are on the Human Resources Committee. That's the likely committee where that bill will be assigned, and it's we have a committee process. That's what it's for, is to assess bills, figure out whether those bills work, make sense, and whether they're going to move forward. So we'll wait and see what the Human Resources Committee does next week. As you know, the second funnel is 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we have 2 weeks to take up House files that we receive in committee and bring them out of committee. If they're not out by then, they're dead for the session.
Calling it a slush fund. Yet I thought that there was some movement on Democrats' part in that conference committee to look at some sort of taxpayer fund, you know, a smaller amount, maybe.
We keep moving, they keep standing still.
Okay, but my point is, how can you agree to it partially if you're calling it a slush fund?
What we want to make sure is that the language is such that there has to be bipartisan consensus on what, first of all, we have concerns about how much money is going to go into that fund, and our fear is that it will be used to take care of Wall Street instead of Main Street. So we have some tax cut policies that we're pursuing as well. And you'll be seeing those over the coming weeks. We want to make sure this money isn't locked up for mostly big out-of-state corporations. We think the focus ought to be on small businesses, ought to be on Main Street.
How does spinning off indigent defense and the other issues get you anywhere? Because the House would have to agree to that.
And we think the House ought to agree that we should pay our bills. We owe people for services rendered. They are 2 to 4 weeks behind in paying people. You know, we're certainly going to expect them to pay their income taxes as they file those coming up next month. We're certainly going to expect them to pay us, but we're not going to pay them for services they've rendered to the state of Iowa. That's really pretty absurd. And because we are struggling through on our disagreements on a set of other issues, doesn't mean those people should pay the price.
Is the intent to move forward with that nuclear power plant bill, despite the letter from 9 members of your caucus yesterday expressing concern about it?
I think we all have concerns about that legislation. I think that's why we have a committee process. There's a subcommittee meeting today. I believe there's also meetings and discussions going on in the executive branch about that legislation. That's the nature of this institution. There are 9 people with strongly held feelings about that bill. I commend them for asking tough questions, and I think before we proceed, a lot of tough questions have to be answered. And we'll decide whether those questions have been answered to a majority satisfaction, and decide what we're going to do when we've gone through that process.
Will the Senate debate the gambling bill next week?
I think it's likely that we'd like to see if the votes are there to do it. I don't think anybody's done a vote count yet. I think we'll be, on all these kinds of issues, I think we'll be going through that exercise over the next 10 days to see what's available, see if there's enough votes to support it. So on all those controversial issues that are out there, we're making assessments as to whether there's critical mass of support and whether we're going to pursue them.
That's likely not a partisan issue, is it?
It never has been.
About 100
Yep.
Do you expect the gambling bill to address the tax rate at all, or is it?
No.
It's all this totally
No.
other issues?
Yep.
I understand that GMP was up here quite a bit this week. Have you all warmed up your business last week?
I was never cold to him.
What's on tap for next week?
It's a lot of effort to move the bills that we think are critical for the House to consider on our side. We will be finishing up on our set of jobs bills about putting Iowans back to work. So we'll be finishing up on those. We passed 3 this week actually, and we'll be passing a couple more next week. And we continue to believe that's the most important thing for us to focus on, is putting Iowans back to work.
How did they pass the bill that gives agriculture protections against people who misrepresent themselves and come on their property and videotape and that type of thing. They amended it in such a way that people who were on the puppy mill issue last year say that it undoes what they thought they accomplished last year. That's on your calendar. Are you going to take up that issue, and are you going to?
You know, it's almost for every bill on the calendar at this point, it's a question of, is there consensus? Is there a way to find broad support in the legislature for that? And what do the experts in our caucus feel about it? So we'll certainly let the Ag Committee folks review what changes the House has made, figure out whether that's a bill worth pursuing.
Speaking of consensus, someone mentioned on the Senate floor this week that why don't we just agree to 1% on allowable growth? Are we any closer to that sort of agreement?
I've not heard the House move on that issue. I've not heard the governor's office move on that issue. As you know, we took up on Monday a bill to do 2%. We took up the House file, which we thought was poorly drafted. We think the statute suggests it should be a single subject, single year of funding. They had 2 years in their bill, but in spite of that, we took their bill up, we changed it, and we sent it back to them. We hope that they'll respond to that.
What are the prospects for addressing the constitutional concerns with that military medical?
We're working through that. I think you'll see an amendment. I think that bill's likely to pass. A little bit. You have to be a little bit careful about it. It appeared to me, as originally written, that if a kid went up and got his father's medals out of the trunk in the attic and put him on, that he'd be guilty of an aggravated misdemeanor. Without ever saying anything, he'd be guilty of an aggravated misdemeanor. We don't think that was people's intent, so we tried to craft the law in a way that we believe will be constitutional. So.
Thank you.
Jack.